Think about the last time you sat in silence. No phone, no screen, no sound, just you and your own thoughts. How long did it last? 10 minutes? 5? Maybe less than 2. If the idea of sitting alone with nothing to stimulate you feels deeply uncomfortable, almost unbearable, then what you are about to hear is not just important, it is urgent. Because that discomfort you feel, that restless pulling sensation that drags your hand toward your phone before you even realize it, is not a personality flaw. It is not laziness. It is not weakness. It is evidence of something far more serious happening inside your brain, something that has been building quietly, invisibly, for years. The world you live in today has been engineered, deliberately and precisely, to make you feel that discomfort. Every app, every platform, every delivery service, every autoplay feature has been designed by some of the most brilliant minds on the planet with a single goal: to make waiting feel intolerable, and to make immediate reward feel not just normal, but necessary. And the terrifying truth is that it is working, not just on your habits, not just on your attention span. It is working on the actual structure of your brain. We live in an era where food arrives at your door before you have even changed out of your pajamas, where answers to questions appear before you finish typing them, where entertainment never ends, never pauses, never asks you to be patient. On the surface, this looks like progress. It looks like comfort. It looks like the future that humanity worked so hard to build. But underneath that surface, something is quietly breaking. Your brain, the most complex and extraordinary organ in the known universe, was not built for this. It was built for a world where rewards were rare, where effort preceded satisfaction, where waiting was not a flaw in the system, but the very foundation of survival. For hundreds of thousands of years, the human brain developed in a world where you had to hunt for food, wait for seasons to change, build relationships slowly over time, and earn every comfort through sustained effort and patience. That long arc of effort and reward is what shaped your dopamine system, your emotional regulation, your capacity for resilience. And in the span of just a few decades, that ancient architecture has been flooded with a level of constant stimulation it was never designed to handle. Dopamine is the chemical at the center of this story. Most people think of dopamine as the pleasure chemical, the thing your brain releases when something good happens. But that is only part of the picture. Dopamine is more accurately described as the anticipation chemical. It surges not just when you receive a reward, but when you expect one. It is the feeling of reaching for your phone. It is the moment before you open an app. It is the 2 seconds before a video loads. And every time that cycle completes quickly, every time the reward arrives almost instantly, your brain learns something. It learns that discomfort is not something to be tolerated. It learns that waiting is a problem to be solved immediately. It learns that the gap between desire and satisfaction should be as short as possible. Over time, with enough repetition, your brain begins to lose its tolerance for that gap entirely. And that loss, that shrinking of your capacity to wait, to sit, to endure, is where the real damage begins. Dr. Mindful Shift has spoken extensively about this neurological shift, describing it not as a moral failure of modern people, but as a predictable biological response to an environment that has outpaced our evolution. When your brain is conditioned to expect fast rewards, it begins to treat anything that requires patience as a threat. The prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for long-term thinking, emotional regulation, and impulse control, becomes weaker in its influence over the limbic system, which is the emotional, reactive, survival-driven part of your brain. What this means in practical terms is that the parts of you that are supposed to say wait, think, consider the long term, are slowly losing ground to the parts of you that say now, react, feel this immediately. This is not a metaphor. This is measurable neurological change. And it is happening to millions of people right now, across every age group, in every part of the world. The consequences show up in ways that most people never connect back to this source. You feel anxious, but you cannot explain why. You feel emotionally exhausted, but you have not done anything particularly demanding. You feel a hollow restlessness that no amount of scrolling or snacking or streaming can seem to fill. You start projects and abandon them. You make plans and cancel them. You feel bursts of motivation followed by crashes of apathy. You find it harder to be present in conversations, in relationships, in your own life. You reach for stimulation the moment stillness arrives, not because you enjoy it, but because stillness has started to feel genuinely painful. And the cruel irony is that the very behavior you use to escape that discomfort, the scrolling, the snacking, the constant consumption, is the same behavior that deepens it. Every quick fix trains your brain to need the next quick fix faster and stronger. The trap does not just catch you, it tightens with every attempt to escape it. This is where we are. This is the reality that most people are living inside of, without ever having it named clearly enough to understand. And understanding it, truly seeing it for what it is the first act of resistance. Now that you understand what is happening inside your brain, the next question becomes the one that truly matters. What do you do about it? And this is where most conversations about mental health and modern technology stop short. They name the problem with great clarity. They paint the picture of dopamine loops and prefrontal cortex erosion with scientific precision. And then they offer something vague and unsatisfying, like use your phone less, or practice mindfulness, and leave you standing at the edge of a very deep problem with a very small shovel. But the real answer, the one grounded in neuroscience and cognitive behavioral science and years of careful observation of how human beings actually change, is both more demanding and more hopeful than a simple tip. It requires you to understand something about your brain that most people are never taught, something that changes the way you see every struggle, every failure of willpower, every moment of giving in to the pull of instant reward. Your brain is not broken. It is trained, and anything that has been trained can be retrained. That distinction is not just comforting. It is the entire foundation of recovery. The science of neuroplasticity tells us that the brain remains capable of change throughout the entire human lifespan. The connections that have been strengthened by years of instant gratification are not permanent sentences. They are habits of firing, patterns that were reinforced through repetition and can be reshaped through a different kind of repetition. But here is what the research also tells us. And this is the part that requires your full attention, because this is where most people give up before they even begin. The early stages of retraining your brain are genuinely uncomfortable. Not uncomfortable in a mild, slightly annoying way. Uncomfortable in a way that feels wrong, feels like failure, feels like something is broken. When you begin to introduce delay between desire and satisfaction, your brain does not quietly accept the change. It resists. It escalates. It sends signals of anxiety and agitation and restlessness that feel urgent and real and deeply unpleasant. This is not a sign that you are failing. This is a sign that the retraining is working. The discomfort you feel in those moments is the sensation of your brain being asked to build new pathways. And just like a muscle being trained for the first time, the burning is not damage. It is growth. Dr. Mindful Shift describes this phase as the most critical and most misunderstood window in the entire process of mental and behavioral change. Most people, when they feel that discomfort rising, interpret it as evidence that they cannot change, that they are too far gone, that this approach is not working for them. And so they retreat back into the familiar comfort of instant reward, and the cycle deepens. But the people who push through that window, who learn to sit with the discomfort instead of immediately escaping it, begin to experience something remarkable on the other side. They begin to rediscover a kind of satisfaction that instant gratification can never provide. The quiet, deep, earned satisfaction of having waited, of having resisted, of having chosen the long path over the short one. That feeling, which your brain has been starved of, is more nourishing than any quick reward. And once you begin to taste it again, something shifts at a fundamental level. The cognitive behavioral exercises that form the practical core of this transformation are not complicated, but they must be practiced with honesty and consistency. The first is what researchers call stimulus delay, the deliberate introduction of a waiting period between the impulse and the action. When you feel the urge to reach for your phone, you wait. Not forever, not even for long at first. You start with 60 seconds. You sit with the discomfort of the urge, you observe it without acting on it, and then you make a conscious choice about whether to act. This single practice, done repeatedly and honestly, begins to rebuild the connection between your prefrontal cortex and your impulse response. It is a small act with an enormous neurological consequence, because every time you choose to pause, You are strengthening the exact neural pathway that instant gratification has been eroding. You are literally rebuilding the architecture of your self-control, one deliberate pause at a time. The second practice is discomfort journaling, a technique drawn directly from cognitive behavioral therapy that involves sitting with an uncomfortable emotion or sensation and writing about it in real time, without trying to fix it or escape it. This practice does something that no amount of positive thinking can achieve. It teaches your nervous system that discomfort is survivable, that it has a beginning and a middle and an end, that it will not destroy you. Most anxiety and emotional dysregulation is driven not by the discomfort itself, but by the terror of the discomfort, the belief, held deep in the body, that if you feel this feeling fully, something catastrophic will happen. Discomfort journaling dismantles that belief through direct experience. You feel it, you write it, you survive it, and slowly, your brain updates its threat assessment. The things that once sent you reaching for distraction begin to lose their power because you have proven to yourself, repeatedly and concretely, that you can hold them without breaking. And here is where the suspense deepens, because everything we have discussed so far, every exercise and every insight, and every moment of hard-won understanding, all of it rests on a single question that most people are too afraid to ask themselves honestly. A question so simple it sounds almost trivial, but so profound that how you answer it will determine everything that follows. Are you truly ready to feel uncomfortable on purpose? Because the answer to that question is the door. And on the other side of that door is everything you have been looking for. The door is open. You are standing at the threshold of something that most people never reach, not because they lack intelligence or capability, but because they were never shown what this threshold looks like or told that crossing it was even possible. Most people spend their entire lives cycling between the hunger for something more and the comfort of something immediate, never understanding that those two forces are not enemies of each other. They are two sides of the same unresolved question. The question of who you are willing to become when becoming requires discomfort. When becoming requires that you sit in the fire of your own restlessness without running. When becoming requires that you look at the habits you have built, the scrolling, the snacking, the constant distraction, the relentless search for the next quick feeling of okay, and choose, with full awareness and full honesty, to build something different. Not because the old habits were evil, not because you were weak for forming them, but because you have now seen clearly what they are costing you, and you have decided that the cost is too high. That decision, that single, quiet, internal decision, is the most powerful neurological event that can happen inside a human brain. It is the moment the prefrontal cortex reasserts its authority. It is the moment the long arc of growth begins again. But decision alone is not transformation. And this is the part of the journey where so many people lose their footing, not from lack of desire, but from lack of understanding about how sustainable change actually works. They make the decision with enormous energy and enormous sincerity, and then they expect the path forward to feel like freedom immediately. They expect the discomfort to lift. They expect the pull of instant reward to weaken overnight. And when it does not, when the urge returns the next morning just as strong, when the anxiety spikes again in the afternoon, when the evening brings the same hollow restlessness it always has, they interpret this as failure. They conclude that the decision did not work, that they are, once again, back at the beginning. But they are not at the beginning. They are exactly where they are supposed to be. Because sustainable neurological change does not move in a straight line. It moves in spirals. You return to the same terrain again and again, but each time you return, you are slightly different, slightly more equipped, slightly more familiar with the landscape of your own resistance. And that familiarity, accumulated slowly and honestly over time, is what eventually becomes mastery. Dr. Mindful Shift reminds us that the most dangerous myth in the entire conversation about self-improvement is the myth of the single turning point. The idea that real change looks like a dramatic before and after, a sudden awakening, a moment so powerful and clear that everything transforms in its light. That myth is not just false. It is actively harmful, because it teaches people to wait for a feeling of readiness that will never come in the form they are expecting, and to dismiss the small, unglamorous, daily acts of resistance as not enough. But those small acts are everything. The 60-second pause before reaching for your phone is everything. The discomfort journal filled with honest, imperfect, sometimes repetitive entries is everything. The choice to cook a meal instead of ordering one, not because ordering is wrong, but because choosing the slower path on purpose is an act of neurological training. That choice is everything. Every single time you choose the longer road, you are not just building a habit. You are rebuilding a brain. You are restoring the biological capacity for patience, for depth, for the kind of sustained attention that makes a full and meaningful life possible. And what waits on the other side of that restoration is not a life without pleasure. This is not a call to deprivation or asceticism or the rejection of modern comfort. The goal is not to make your life harder for the sake of hardship. The goal is to restore your brain's ability to experience the full range of what life actually offers, including joy that goes deeper than a dopamine spike, including connection that goes beyond the surface of a screen, including the profound and irreplaceable satisfaction of becoming someone who can bear difficulty without being destroyed by it. When your brain is no longer enslaved to instant reward, you begin to notice things you had forgotten were possible. The taste of a meal you cooked slowly, the satisfaction of finishing something difficult, the warmth of a conversation that had no agenda, the strange and beautiful peace of sitting in silence and finding, to your astonishment, that you are enough company for yourself. These are not small things. These are the things that make a human life feel worth living. And they are available to you, not in some distant future version of yourself, but in the version of you that begins making different choices today, in this moment, with whatever you have right now. You do not need to be fully healed to begin. You do not need to have all the answers, all the willpower, all the certainty. You only need to be willing. Willing to feel the discomfort without escaping it. Willing to choose the longer road, even when the short one is right there. Willing to trust that the brain that learned to crave instant reward is the same brain that can learn, slowly and surely, and with great patience, to crave something deeper. That willingness is the beginning of everything. And everything begins now. If you are benefiting from our topics, please subscribe, like, and turn on the bell notification so you can see our new videos early.